All right, great. Let's get everybody in and let's begin this session. We've got a great guest speaker here today. Let's go ahead and close the doors. There's a seat over here. There's two seats over here if you guys want to come up here. There's two seats over here. There's two seats up here in the front. And there's a seat right behind there, so we can get 5 people up here. And then there's 2 seats in the back over there. Michaela, there's one right over there. It's okay. Okay. Hi, Dr. Gora. Hey. All right, we're just waiting for people to get settled and get seated, and we'll begin. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to our 7th annual Amazon Web Services Public Sector Summit. We're very excited. There's a lot of things going on with FedRAMP, and for those of you who do not know what FedRAMP stands for, it's the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program. And I'm very happy that Matthew Goodrich is here today as our guest speaker. We're going to have this informational Q&A session that talks about what's happening in the last couple of years and where FedRAMP is today. So just to kind of give you an overview of this session, you know, our public sector customers have workloads that often operate in very sensitive areas, and they have to meet certain security requirements that are related to their regimes, such as the Department of Defense. They have their cloud computing security requirements guide. We have our federal civilian agencies who have to comply with the Federal Information Systems Management Act and with the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program known as FedRAMP. We also have criminal justice information systems and also the Federal Education and Privacy Rights Act. So there's a lot of compliance regimes that are out there for our public sector customers, and this session is geared to addressing what our customers are doing today, what are the policymakers doing to support them, and how AWS is working very closely with them to continue their cloud adoption. In today's sessions, we're going to learn how FedRAMP program is accelerating the authorization process to enable more federal cloud workloads and has redesigned the process in order to shorten the authorization timeframes. So we're really excited to hear what's going on in the FedRAMP PMO. I'd like to kind of give an overview of Matt. I call him Matt because I know Matt for a long time now. It's been since almost 4.5 years I've been working with Matt and his program. So Matt Goodrich is the director of the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program, and he has worked on FedRAMP as part of the Federal Cloud Computing Initiative since August 2009. In his role, he manages the program and he provides the overall direction for FedRAMP. As a federal-wide initiative, the FedRAMP is one of the most leading cloud computing security program that is paving the way for cloud adoption and ensuring the security of cloud computing solution is used by US governments. Matt has focused his career on removing the barriers to cloud adoption across the federal government, and he has been recognized for his efforts, being a Fed 100 winner and also a Fierce Government IT Fierce 15 Award winner in 2015. And Matt began his career as a presidential fellowship, management fellowship back in 2009 with a bachelor's degree in computer information systems and a Juris Doctorate in the University of Denver. So I didn't want to throw in that you got your bachelor's degree from University of Miami because we're rivals. I went to Florida State University, so go Seminoles.
It was a little hurdle to our friendship for that.
So Matt, it's been nearly like 4 years now. We've worked a lot together when cloud first came about, working with OMB and working with GSA. It's been such a game changer, I have to say. And to date, FedRAMP has authorized over 70 cloud service providers. That's huge. I just remember the last time it was just like only 2 or 3 were just like in the queue, and it was really, really nerve-wracking at that time. And you also have certified over 41 third-party assessors to enable the US government to accelerate it to cloud computing.
Right.
So last year, your program released FedRAMP Forward. And you focused on 3 key areas: stakeholder engagements, you also focused on aligning with cybersecurity changes, and improving efficiency. So last month, like about March, you had FedRAMP Accelerated, and there was a big industry event. Can you tell us more about the salient initiatives and outcomes that are coming out of your program and what's happening?
Great. Yeah. So when I came into the director position about 1.5 years ago, we put out FedRAMP Forward, and it was really 3 sort of key areas of what we were going to focus on in the program. And one of those was stakeholder engagement. And I think one of the things that that has been a theme across GSA over the past 2 years, and a really big push from some of the politicals at GSA, is really looking at our programs as a customer-focused program. And government doesn't always do a great job at looking at our other agencies from GSA or other agencies as customers, or even our citizens as customers, because you're somewhat forced to do what we tell you to because we are the government. But at the end of the day, we are engaging, and we want to make sure people are engaging with us in the best way possible. So one of those things that we were looking at with FedRAMP Forward was customer engagement. And so we went out and really looked at, asked people what were we doing, and how were people using FedRAMP? How would they like to use FedRAMP? How are they doing it well? How are they not doing it so well? And so you mentioned that we have 70 authorized providers. We have 43 PAOs. We work with every single major agency, as well as many of the micro and small agencies. So we're talking to people all the time, but we really underwent a conversation that was a very different conversation around that engagement. It's a very deliberate conversation about how they were using the program and how we could make it better for them. Not just telling them how to use the program, asking them how they're using the program. And if you think about that conversation, it's very different. And so what we heard, though, was while we did have this great plan that everyone liked, it was like we were trying to boil the ocean. We kind of would take one stakeholder's idea of something that we could fix and start and take that on as an initiative. Another person would say something, we would take it on as an initiative. And if you think of any growing program or new program, before you really have a brand, you want to make everyone happy. You want to get as many customers as possible, and you want to make sure you're appeasing everybody. Well, at some point, you have to bring it back into focus. And that's what we sort of realized as we underwent a lot of that customer outreach, was we really needed to renew our focus, which luckily aligned with one of our initiatives in FedRAMP Forward, which was efficiencies. And what we heard from almost everybody was the authorization packages that you all create are fantastic. People are reusing them, but we want you to do them faster. We want you to continue to have these secure offerings for us and allow us to leverage them quickly, but we need you to have more of them, and we need you to make sure that they get through faster. And so that's when we underwent this design process that we revealed in March of looking at our authorization process and saying, how could we do this faster? So our authorizations, when we originally started, were with some experienced providers who had recently done some authorizations, and they took on average between 6 and 7 months. And as we started to go through, some authorizations would still last about 6 to 7 months. Some were, though, taking upwards of 18 to 24 months. And so we wanted to analyze how could we make sure that we did these authorizations, but they would happen in under 6 months. Not just that they were happening at an average speed of that time, but how can we ensure that as we're going through, we're working with the right providers to make sure it can happen in under 6 months. And so that was something that we really did a very hard redesign process and sort of internally take a look at how we are offering our services. How can we do them a bit differently and make sure that we could make that happen in under 6 months? And so that's what we revealed in March.
So I really like the focus on redesign. It really resonates with Amazon Web Services. Every year we have our largest conference, which is called reInvent. And it's kind of like redesign when you are pulling people together, pulling the partners, pulling the industry, pulling agencies, and even the third-party assessors coming together to kind of look at, this is where our target is, and we're trying to collaborate and come up with a solution that's going to work for everybody. So I really like that, because for reInvent, we do the same thing. At Amazon, when we have our reInvent, we are enabling our customers to look at new solutions and also getting feedback from them as well.
Right.
And I like that whole approach because it gives them an opportunity to reinvent themselves, to learn something new, and also to stay relevant in today's changing marketplace. So it sounds like you guys are also, doing that same process, which I really, really, really like, because it's really going to change the way we do authorizations today. So, we talked about, the central factors of, why you guys were looking at redesigning the FedRAMP process. So, what was that effort like? And I know you talked about capabilities at one point in your discussion during the FedRAMP Accelerated BD. What do we mean by that, and what does that mean to our AWS customers?
Sure. So as we went to start the redesign process, it was interesting because when we had that feedback, we went back to the team, and we were having a sort of session with some of the key players, and someone sat in the room and said, "Well, what did you all do before FedRAMP?" And there were CNAs, but people weren't doing really CNAs for cloud systems at that point in time, and we sort of said, people weren't authorizing cloud providers. So I said, so you created something 4 years ago. You can create something new now. And it was sort of an interesting revelation, because I think in government, it's a lot of times we see as though we've created something, we've created a process, we've created requirements, we've created something, to think that you can actually step back and do it again. Doesn't mean the way you're doing it right now is wrong, or that it can't continue to work. That doesn't mean you can't create another way to do it as well. And so that was sort of our driving force. When we look at capabilities, after we realized that we could do it again, we said, well, let's go back and let's look at all of how people have been going through this process. And one of the most powerful things that we did was we looked at customer journeys. And that is looking at all of our stakeholders and sort of how they do things within the context of FedRAMP. And customer journeys are pretty simple, but really give a lot of information for really understanding what people go through. And so we did that with not only internally to our team, but externally with a lot of our providers. And basically said, from the point some executive at your company said FedRAMP until today, what have you done with FedRAMP? What were your internal emails like? What were your decision points internally? When did you actually talk to our office? When were you engaging with our office? When were we giving you feedback? All the good, the bad, the ugly, but just every time something had to do with FedRAMP, let's look at it. We did that internally for us with our own teams as well, by looking at, once you started working with a cloud provider, what were your interactions with that cloud provider going back and forth all the way through? And as we looked at it, we realized we were approaching these authorizations from two totally different views. If you're looking at it from a provider's perspective, an executive said, go do FedRAMP. So then you had some PM say, okay, great, now I've got this great new project that is exciting, whatever. Well, they didn't always say it was exciting, but sure.
Exciting.
Compliance activities aren't always the favorite project for people, I get it. But would go in and look and say, okay, great, I understand the requirements. Now, these are the requirements we don't have. We need to change our system a bit, or implement this, or tighten up some parameters here, or create some new policies. And then we'd go through an audit, and then come to us, and then we would start going through and looking at the documentation that related to what all they had done. Well, we were going the exact opposite view. We were saying, great, I want to understand what you do by looking at your documentation. So I'm looking at your documentation, I'm looking at how you wrote it, then I'm trying to understand, then we'd go through an audit, then there might be some fixes, and then we'd finally authorize. So we're coming at it from two totally different perspectives. But at the end of the day, what we were all trying to do was understand the capabilities. And so from our provider's perspective, what was so hard for us when we were looking at documentation is documentation's really hard to write, particularly when you're looking at technical systems, or systems when you're talking about translating something that honestly you can't even see into the English language, and you're reading some requirements that sometimes look like they're written in Greek, and then you're supposed to write your response to it in English. And it was sort of an interesting way that we were going through a process. We were just trying to poke holes in documentation to understand what people were doing. And so when those documents are also sometimes thousands of pages, we wanted to get to a place where we were saying, how do we understand what you're doing as a provider? I don't care how you write it. Like, at the end of the day, I care that Amazon has X, Y, and Z in their system to protect my data. If you wrote it poorly, great, we can fix that later, but I really need to understand what it is that you're technically doing. And so we wanted to make sure our new process got that up front, instead of looking at documentation up front, which is the way that we had consistently been doing it, and it's the way that most of governments are doing it. It doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it doesn't work, but it takes longer. And so we've basically done, with that, we also looked at our providers that had gone through the fastest. And the analogy I've been using is, if anyone's going to go out and go to law school or go to grad school, you're going to go take a GMAT pretest. You're going to take some LSAT courses or something like that. If you're going to undergo an audit, you're probably going to undergo a pre-audit to make sure you're going to pass the real audit. And that's what all of our providers that had gone through quickly had done. They had gotten one of their auditors to come out, do a pre-assessment and say, hey, you have X, Y, and Z, you're missing something here, you're missing this, get this in place, and then once you have that in place, you'll get through quickly. So we thought if all of our audit firms, our 3POs are doing this, why don't we just normalize that? Why don't we make that a requirement? Because there's two things that give that power for us. One, for the government, it means I know our providers have the capabilities. That means I have a pre-audit saying they likely have everything in place. For our private industry partners, it lets them know if they don't have something in place, what they're going to have to get in place in order to get through. And they can make a better informed business decision about whether FedRAMPs are right for them. And they can know how long it's going to take. Rather than going through documentation and poor writing, let's look at it from a technical perspective. So that's really where we're looking from the capabilities, is if you look at the authorizations, having policies or procedures or things like that are absolutely required and absolutely necessary to make sure the system maintains its operations. But that can usually be updated and fixed during the course of an authorization, or sort of, it's much easier to update those. If you're looking at technical capabilities on a system, it's much harder to implement them. It takes longer, it takes more money. And so those are things we want to highlight earlier up front through those capabilities views, rather than throughout the authorization process. So that's why we've really tried to focus that in our process as the update, is making sure that's up front, so everyone can make a better decision as they go through the process, and it becomes more predictable.
So would you say that the capabilities that you're describing here is more, you talk about focusing on the technical capabilities, and it's kind of like a readiness assessment. Mm-hmm. So that's leveraging a lot of the work that our current 3PALs do already. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of focus on leveraging the independent third-party assessment, but having them do this pre-audit, if you will, mm-hmm. on a cloud service providers. Can you kind of give us more background on some of the examples of the technical capabilities that you guys are looking at?
Sure. So like for one example, so some of the examples of what's been the hardest for us to, or issues that have come out that we think we'll be able to fix with the readiness assessment to have up front in our decision making. If you have to have encryption anywhere in your system, there's a requirement for encryption. You have to have it FIPS 140-2 validated. So let's go out and make sure wherever encryption is, it's FIPS 140-2. And that's not as easy of a statement as it sounds, because there are places where people will put encryption in areas that you might not necessarily see or know about until you're actually understanding the nuances of a system. Two-factor authentication, relatively simple at this point, but this, again, not everyone's been using or implementing two-factor in the exact way that their federal government requires. Also boundary, making sure that the boundary is appropriate. We had one provider who came in through FedRAMP and never made it through because as we got to the very end, found out they had jump servers that were located in the UK, and they couldn't re-architect their system. And that wasn't something that was necessarily something that was anyone in the government's fault, but the provider themselves didn't even know that that was part of their boundary. And so trying to understand how we can implement some of these things up front that allows us to really define what we're authorizing from a technical perspective, I think, is what we're trying to get to with these capabilities assessments. So that if you are a provider, let's say, and they come in for a readiness assessment and you don't have FIPS 140-2 encryption in certain places, then you can understand, okay, I need to rip out and replace X, Y, and Z. It's going to cost this much. It's going to take this much time. Does this mean FedRAMP is still worth it to me for a business investment? From the government side, I know I'm not going to engage with you for another 3-4 months until you have it implemented so that we can actually go through the process. So instead of sort of having those decisions muddled in throughout the entire process, you have a better decision point up front about whether it makes sense for the government to go through, but also for a provider, whether they have everything there in place, or if they don't, what it's going to take to get there.
Right, getting a really good security baseline up front. Mm-hmm. So FedRAMP Accelerate, I know that you have a couple of pilots. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the current process right now and what's happening with several of the pilots? I know one of the pilots actually is using AWS services today. Do you mind sharing that with the audience?
Sure. So we have, we revealed the process in March, and we believe actually that the process can take, I guess I'll say it publicly, I think, for the first time. We're hoping it's going to take 3 months. The fastest that we've been able to do it.
3 months, that's
3
huge.
months, yeah. So my team kind of hates me because sometimes I make crazy goals for us, but I actually really think it's possible. And so as we go through and have looked at what all we're doing and what's required to go through these authorizations, we functionally believe it can happen in that amount of time. So what we've done, though, is we've had all the providers have gone through a readiness assessment. We've looked at their capabilities and deemed them ready. we had our first kickoff meeting with Microsoft for their CRM Online to go through theirs last week or 2 weeks ago. And it's a very different conversation than what we normally have with kickoff meetings, because if you think about the processes, we've done it differently. We're now coming in with understanding the capabilities, actually understanding the risk of the system, and having it all documented. It's very different when you have all of that. So our old kickoff meetings used to be about an hour and a half, and it would basically be a few questions, but people didn't really know much about the system. You couldn't dig into it because you weren't talking about risks. You were trying to sort of, at a high level, almost like a BD person coming in telling you what the system does. Instead, we had a 2-day meeting. And it was a really awesome meeting with all the teams from DoD, DHS, and GSA, as well as the independent auditor, Veris, and Microsoft, and sitting in the room, all talking through what was going on. And when we left, the members from the DoD, DHS, and GSA team said, we actually believe that 2-day conversation took off at least a month of our review time, because we now understand what's going on. We understand where to dig in. We understand what we want to look more at, and not instead having to dig through everything to figure out where it is that they want to place more focus and where they think portions of the system are at risk. And so cloud.gov is another one that we're really excited about. It's a new system that GSA is building through 18F, and it's a really great platform about how to launch secure applications into environments like Amazon. They're hosted in Amazon. Right now they're going through their testing. And so it's been fun seeing them as a new system come in and actually go through the readiness assessment. And they did have some findings. And so it was really interesting, though, for them to see up front, hey, here's some of the main findings of things that once you get into the full-blown audit, these need to be in place. And so it was a really great sort of proof of concept for us that we found out some things up front that they were able to meet and implement, but that had we not done this process up front, it might have extended the timeline even longer, because we would have been in the process for 6 months and then found out that they had those issues. So it's been a really fun, a really interesting process, and also a great one to see sort of how providers are leveraging things like cloud.gov sitting on Amazon, how they can use some of Amazon's services to help them deliver their services as well.
All right, so there's been a lot of questions about reuse of Amazon Web Services. Can you describe, what does reuse mean? I mean, like if you go to FedRAMP.gov and you look at agency authorizations and you look at JAB authorizations, what does reuse mean? And for customers who want to use AWS, can you kind of describe reuse and leveraging?
Sure. So that's actually one of our biggest pushes that we've been having lately within FedRAMP. We hired someone about 9 months ago, Ashley Mahan, who used to be one of our FedRAMP security specialists, helping providers get through the Joint Authorization Board. But she's really been our agency evangelist, going out and talking to agencies about how to do FedRAMP. And a lot of that is how to reuse authorizations. So really awesome. We were crunching some numbers lately over the last few weeks and realized over the last 9 months, we've had a huge jump in FedRAMP, not only in the number of providers going from 40 to over 70, but also the number of services that are actually being reused and the quantity of that reuse. So our agency, the authorizations that are being leveraged are reused, meaning, say, Amazon, for example, was originally authorized by HHS. I should have looked before I came here, but there's a lot of other agencies that have granted authorizations and are reusing that authorization. Well, that number over the last 9 months has jumped by 200% by the number of agencies who are reusing other people's authorizations. And that really gets to the heart of what FedRAMP are. And one of our intents, one of our 2 main goals is making sure it's secure, but also making sure people don't do it again. And so that 200% increase means agencies are functionally reusing cloud providers so that HHS authorized it, but then State Department and Energy and whoever else is using it doesn't have to go through that same work. It's a significant amount of cost savings and time savings. And so functionally what it means, though, is each one of the providers who are having reuse, they're experiencing that they at least almost, for the average number of cloud providers experiencing reuse, they have at least 5 agencies reusing them. So that means previously you'd have one agency authorize and go to another agency, do the same effort, another agency, same effort. Not only is it saving that time and money for agencies, but for people like Amazon as well. But really what it means is you want to understand, as an agency coming in to use a system, you want to understand if it's secure. It's not really that much more complicated than that. You already have all the requirements. You already know the security things that have to be in place. Well, if Amazon's already been authorized by one agency, since it's a cloud environment, you're using the same environment. It's the same controls that are going to apply, the same security. So there's no work that has to be redone. You go in, you look at what's been implemented, you look at the rest of the system, and you grant an authorization and say, I can use this off of the same information. And so that's really at the heart of what that reuse is making sure that agencies don't redo the level of effort. They don't drive you and your office crazy by saying, I need you to do more work when it's already been done and can't be done again.
I mean, that's pretty much what FedRAMP is there for, to standardize that authorization process, to create one mechanism where agencies can go and take our package, review it, make their risk-based decision, and authorize it for their mission. So that's another good question that I have here. Risk-based decision.
Yeah.
What does that mean for a customer when they have to make a risk-based decision?
So if you are a system and you can build a system that has 0 risks, quit your job, go build that system, you'll be the richest person in the world. There are no systems that have 0 risks. There are really smart, bad people out there that are always creating new vulnerabilities, new things that are going to be attacking systems or ways to exploit a system. But basically that means that every system is going to have risk. There's never going to be a 100% secure system. The only way to have a 100% secure system is to have it not connected to anything. And with the world that we live in, everything's interconnected right now. So you're basically looking at systems and saying what risks reside on that environment, what vulnerabilities are there, and it's a constant analysis of that. It's not something that's a point in time. Particularly with cloud environments and introduction to new services, or just the dynamic nature of cloud, there's always going to be new risks. But it's making sure that risk level matches what the type of risk or the type of security you need to protect the data you're putting in that environment. So if you look at the way that we've authorized providers right now, we have low systems, moderate systems, and we're about to have high systems. Moderate systems is really for, if you look at regular industry, it's pretty much the best of breed. So that's some financial systems. It goes up to PII information. But in almost anything at moderate really is a sort of industry best of breed in terms of how you authorize those for most what would do industry. For us in government, that is what, like I said, some financial systems and PII and information like that.
So then that brings me to another question. So we have foundational services in our authorization packages for GovCloud and for US East-West. We have customers who ask us, can we use services that are not part of that FedRAMP authorization boundary? So it sounds like they can make a risk-based decision. Is that correct?
Yeah, so so Amazon has a core set of services. You also have additional services that agencies can use. I know that you're going through and authorizing some of those additional services to bring them inside the boundary. I know you've done that once or twice already. But those additional, apparently need to get a little brighter in here for that. But those additional services, agencies can view those services and work with your teams to understand how their data would be using those services and whatever information or auditing that those services have undergone to make sure they understand how that could potentially impact their data or any risks associated with that they need to know to then authorize those services for use themselves. So really when you're looking at that reuse and sort of the maximum amount of reuse, the core set of services are definitely authorized under FedRAMP, which is a really easy reuse. Might be a little more difficult because it's a little more work, but those additional services, if an agency wants to use them, definitely can work with your team to understand how their data would be impacted by using that and whatever information that y'all have around how risky it is, if you will, to authorize those for use.
That's really, really good to be able to share that with the audience. I know we get a lot of misconceptions about that. And to clarify that, can an agency accept another risk of another agency, meaning like if an agency issues an ATO on AWS, can they just take that ATO and say that that's our ATO as well?
No.
And why is that?
So if you look at the law of FISMA, Federal Information Security Management Act, because again in government, if it's not an acronym, then we're not doing something right. But that act basically tells every agency they own their own data. It's related to their mission, they own the data, so they are the ones who have to authorize it. When we started FedRAMP, we were hoping there could be some centralized way that the federal CIO could say, for good of government, everyone can use this. It's just not the way the law is written. But what agencies can do, and what we've gotten to as a sort of second best solution, is that body of evidence to grant that authorization is all there. So while they can't just say, I'm taking your ATO and copying your ATO letter, they can make the same decision, and it can be a lot easier to grant that authorization, particularly because they can look at maybe how one agency is using it and say they're using it for this type of reason or for this type of data, and they could say, well, that's funny, we have the same type of data or similar data, we're using it for similar reasons. There's probably no reason that I shouldn't be able to do the same thing, and they might not have to go into it as in depth if it was something else. So we've tried to get to the heart of what we wanted to do, which was reuse, and how could we make that most effective. It's the same body of evidence, it's just writing your own authorization, because legally that's what you have to do.
Right, and we're seeing quite a bit of authorizing agencies today, leveraging and reusing AWS's ATOs. Like you mentioned earlier that we had
think Commerce just had a big announcement around it.
The Department of Commerce issued 2 ATOs on AWS, so it's just constantly growing. We've also did some partnerships with the FedRAMP PMO. A couple of years ago, we did the FedRAMP tick overlay pilot, and we also are part of the FedRAMP High pilot. Can you kind of tell us where things are now that we've worked with your program on those pilots, and where is the government going with that?
Sure. So Amazon, you've always been a great partner in terms of looking at pilots and how we could grow the program and learn, because we do pilots in the real sense of the word at FedRAMP, in the sense that we don't know what the outcome's always going to be. It's not just the term pilot because we don't want to call it a full-blown whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing. We actually need to learn from it. And so the first one that we did with you all was the TIC pilot. And how many of you are familiar with TIC, or the Trusted Internet Connection? Perfect. For those of you that aren't, it's essentially we use FedRAMP or FISMA authorizes the boundary of a service that we're going to use. Trusted Internet Connection is the idea that you want to secure the connection between like a GSA network and Amazon. So that data, as it transits from the GSA network over to Amazon, making sure that is authorized or secure as well. And so the original idea of TIC was that there was going to be 50 network points from the federal government to any external network or service, which, as we know, when that within a few years of that mandate passing, that was no longer going to be how you could functionally work in the real world. And so what we've been looking is the TIC office, when they created their TIC capabilities, or how to manage that connection, based their controls off of the NIST controls, which is what we use with FedRAMP. So we went and did a mapping between their capabilities and what we have the capabilities we implement on our providers, and saw, could we have a TIC overlay so that we could have providers who have connections that are authorized under the same framework we did FedRAMP. And so it was a really great pilot. We learned quite a bit. We didn't quite get to the intended outcome of, hey, these providers have the ability to have a TIC connection from the agency to the cloud provider's environment, but did have a really good understanding of what providers could provide up to a certain level within that security zone. And so we've been working with OMB around ideas on ways to evolve the TIC mandate, and as well as evolve the TIC capabilities and how agencies can comply with TIC. And the pilot that we did with you all was very instrumental in us sort of understanding where that gap was, as well as how we could make some major policy changes to get more to the intent of what TIC was trying to achieve, as well as what we're doing at FedRAMP and trying to have more alignment. Also, we've been working with you recently on the FedRAMP High pilot. So as I talked earlier about low, moderate, and high, if you look at high impact systems, a lot of portions of normal or regular industry doesn't deal with data at that level of security. So if you're looking at high impact, it's still not national security or classified, but it is life or limb or financial ruin. So you're looking at a lot of DoD data, VA data, justice data, health and human services, things like that. And so we've been working through and understanding what the difference is between a moderate and high, and we've heard from providers that, hey, we can meet this. And we've heard from agencies who say, we really want to be able to move some of these high systems to the cloud, because if you look at the amount of money we spend in federal IT, the budget's roughly $80 billion, depending plus or minus, depending on who you ask. And the number of systems, though, while 80% of those systems are at low and moderate, over 50% of the spend is actually on high systems, because they are so secure and have so many things that we need to have in place. So agencies have been saying, could we leverage the cloud? Could we use the cloud? Because we know there's cost savings and efficiencies and things like that we'd like to see. So we've been working with you and a few other providers around how we could get through and see if we could authorize our providers. We're, I think, very close to a very large announcement around that. But so it's been really interesting working with you all and really understanding what the difference is between a high system and a moderate system, which, if you boil it down, is really a lot of automation. So you basically, if you can automate something, the reason you automate is why? Because that way humans can't mess it up.
Absolutely.
So if you can remove human error from a system, then automate it. And that's important around the types of data that high systems do, as well as making sure a lot of providers have corporate systems that are outside of what they want to include in their authorization boundary. Well, when you're looking at high, that's again something that you can't do. You need to bring in a lot of those corporate shared services into the boundary so they're under the same sort of monitoring and protections of the rest of the system. And so once we have the announcement, we'll have a lot more to talk about. But it's been great working with Amazon through that, and I think we're very close to a big announcement around it.
Yes, absolutely. Another pilot that not a lot of our audience or our customers are aware of is the FedRAMP Conmon pilot, continuous monitoring pilot. I know that when we were doing the FedRAMP High pilot, it was our first time going through the JAP, and also, we started bringing in our continuous monitoring on that. And so we're working with you, and I think it was a great idea that Ashley Mahan, your FedRAMP evangelist, came up and said, let's do a working group. And so we're so large, and we want to meet all of our customers' questions and concerns that they have with continuous monitoring. And I like the approach of having a centralized mechanism. So can you tell the audience about, our engagement with the FedRAMP PMO and who's looking at our ConMon data and how that's being validated in your office?
Sure. So I think there's two sides to it that make it really powerful. Is one, you do have a lot of customers across the government, which makes it very difficult for you at times to make sure you're telling people the same thing everywhere, and that you can make sure that you're managing your customers in the best way possible. For the government, on the other hand, when we have one-offs, it's hard to come with a unified voice if we don't have a place to do that. And so that's one of the reasons we worked with you all to figure out how could we make sure, as we're doing continuous monitoring, and continuous monitoring is such an overloaded term, but basically managing your continued risk posture. So managing sort of the insight into the risks that are associated with Amazon and using those services. And so what we've tried to do is create a working group. And I hate the term working groups because how many people are part of a working group but have never done any work in a working group? So you can raise your hand. I definitely have. I definitely have done that. And so really, though, it's intended to be a group of working individuals that actually are using the system and can work together to understand your environment. Part of that, what we're doing to facilitate that, is make sure we're analyzing all of the monthly reports, as well as any changes and new services that you guys want to bring on, and giving a centralized place so that people are seeing the same information at the same time and can come with a collective voice. But you can also approach a collective voice. You can tell everyone, here's where all the information is. You're all seeing the same information. We're not telling anyone anything different. Everyone's hearing the same thing. And it'll allow you all to have that, but also people in government to learn from everyone else in government, where if someone maybe isn't as familiar with the nuances of how to use the service, they can learn from that. So we're really trying to take not only the continuous monitoring portion of it to make it easier for everyone, but also give us a unified voice, but also just create a sort of community where people who are using Amazon can actually learn functionally, hopefully eventually not just security, but how to functionally use the services even better as well.
Yeah, and that's the direction that we're taking, is like, we've demonstrated that we're meeting the federal government's requirements by going through the FedRAMP security assessment and authorization process. And we call that security of the cloud. And the other component is our customer's responsibility, which is security in the cloud.
Right.
And so these working group forums is an opportunity for our customers to really gain that understanding of how do I use AWS and be secure in the cloud. So this is really great, and we're going to be, our first AWS working group we had was back in May, and we had a really great turnout with our authorizing officials. And thank you for hosting it at GSA and facilitating it. So the next one, we will be doing that. So there's been quite a bit of interesting developments in your program. Reinventing the process, the FedRAMP process that we know today to FedRAMP Accelerated. And then also trying to provide that transparency to align the cybersecurity landscape. There's a lot of changes happening in cybersecurity, and your program trying to come up with a different approach to how do we correlate that data and make it meaningful and valuable for our customers. And then one thing that I really, really liked, you talked about automation and you talked about redesign. And that is creating the agility with authorizations. And what we're looking for, I know from Amazon Web Services, is that we want to have that agility. We provide those services today so that our customers have the ability to respond with expected outcomes. And so I think this whole FedRAMP Accelerated process is going to provide that, because they're going to get that assessment. They have those technical capabilities of knowing this is what I need to do in order to get through FedRAMP. This is what I know that Amazon has gone through and has been assessed by a validated third-party assessor that meets those technical capabilities, so that they have a better understanding of the security that we provide and how they can use our services. And you've done a great job pulling the ecosystem of partners from commercial cloud providers, from the government, from our third-party assessors, all coming together to try to figure out how do we make this more usable and agile for the government today. And there's a lot of changes. So how can AWS partners, we have a lot of partners who build platform as a service, software as a service solutions on AWS. What is FedRAMP Accelerated going to do for them? I mean, the way we do FedRAMP today, is it going to help them? Is it going to make it easier for them to understand the process, to get through the process, to become FedRAMP compliant?
Right.
So how is this going to work for our customers, like our partners especially?
So I think it's great. I mean, y'all already have a few proven success stories of partners who are already FedRAMP authorized, who are part of those 70 that we have in the marketplace. I think the big thing right now in the and what Accelerated is going to do for the Joint Authorization Board, for those going through that route, hopefully it'll be able to scale and allow us to do more with the amount of funding that we have, so that it'll allow us to actually functionally support more providers. But what I think the new readiness review is going to do will really allow your partners to better understand what it takes to get through FedRAMP. You obviously know how difficult it can be, and the type of investment it takes to actually be a part of this space. And I think that readiness review will really allow your partners to better understand at a much quicker and cheaper cost than a full FedRAMP, to understand if it makes sense for them to do it, and if they have the right capabilities in place, or identify any gaps and help them make that decision, and also make that decision much faster. That used to take, with the readiness reviews through my office, used to take anywhere from 3 to 6 months on average. We're now saying that you could probably have an assessor come out and do that assessment, have them write up. It probably takes about a week to do that assessment, maybe a little bit longer, but around a week, and maybe another week or two to write up the report. And our office says we'll review that within a week. We know that we can review that and say, hey, yes, you're ready, or you're not ready within a week. So we're talking about a month-long process from starting a sort of pre-audit or capabilities assessment through a decision by our office whether you're ready or not. And then what we believe that too will do, will give a really big market differentiator for people who are ready to be able to find government customers. So we want to make sure that as agencies are going to start to use a service, if you aren't going to come through the Joint Authorization Board, why don't you have something to sell your services to agencies, so agencies can make a decision, hey, they do have everything I want. But now, the process that the FedRAMP PMO has done a redesign of, if we follow that too, we could have them authorized in 3 months. Or we could have them authorized in maybe 4 months, because they're not maybe the first ones doing it like we are. But the process that they would be able to, your partners will be able to understand how to get through faster and what it takes to get through faster, but also agencies are going to be able to reuse what we've done in order to make that end process a lot faster. So hopefully we'll be fully back up and having as many going through the JAB as possible in the next 3 months. But in the meantime, I think that readiness assessment is going to be a really big deal for your partners to really understand what it takes to get through FedRAMP and make a decision about whether or not it makes sense for them too.
So once they go through the FedRAMP accelerated process, they complete their capabilities assessment that's done by a third-party assessor, and then they're ready, and then they can actually do the full assessment process for the authorization. Which route do they go through? Do they go through the JAB, or, because right now we have like 2 paths. We have the JAB authorization and the agency authorization path.
Right.
So after going through the FedRAMP accelerated process, what do our partners and customers can expect from going through that process? Yeah,
so we're actually working, kicking off, either last week or this week. We've been working with ACT IAC. I don't know, how many of you are familiar with ACT IAC? If you are not, they're a great organization that is a partnership between government, industry, and DC, largely focused on acquisitions and IT and that community. And so we're working through to create a draft prioritization for the JAB. The JAB really to date has worked with any provider that is ready to get an authorization or said that they're ready. At this point, we now need to be focusing our efforts on those that are going to be used the most government-wide. We are having 3 agencies dedicating resources to authorizing providers. We want to make sure that we're actually allocating those resources appropriately. So we're going through a prioritization with that to really understand how providers that are going to go to the JAB, if they are appropriate, and who we're going to invest our time and money in. So that'll be something that'll be a bit different than it has to date as well. Will be sort of vendors who want to go to the JAB actually getting a yes or no about whether you're right for the JAB or not. So if you have really strong feelings about that, other than just pick me, then please engage with ACT IAC. We'll be putting it out a bit further for more public comment after that. But if you want some input into really shaping that, please reach out to that group as well. But the decision would then be if you have FedRAMP ready, the JAB would choose amongst FedRAMP ready providers because we know they're ready. But there's always the agency path. And that's where we say I think FedRAMP ready will really help providers get to find an agency better than they can right now. Right now, they're basically going in and doing a BD sell. saying, I can do this, I'm great, I promise you I'll do this, X, Y, and Z. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Ashley has done a great job really trying to help providers match up to agency needs. But I think this will really give that sort of extra strength to that push, because as agencies are looking for capabilities, they'll also understand from a report that's validated by an independent auditor, as well as the FedRAMP office, that, hey, they do probably have the capabilities in place. They went through a readiness assessment, and they're probably pretty good. You can probably trust what they're saying to get through this process because of these things that we've backed up, and there's more people saying it than just the marketing and sales team. And so that's where we think that that'll really help sort of get more providers through that path.
So after they complete the FedRAMP readiness and they go through the FedRAMP accelerated process, any cloud service providers who's gone through that and has their package ready, that's pretty much where, based on the JAB, they will look at it for prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
And so the JAB is more opted to look at a FedRAMP ready CSP.
Well, the JAB will only look at FedRAMP ready.
Okay.
So unless there's some political push for someone specifically because it's a shared service or something, who knows? But the FedRAMP JAB has said we were only going to deal with JAB ready or FedRAMP ready. So if we go through and we want to understand the capabilities, we want to work with providers that we know we can get through. And that's, if you think about some of the delays that we've had or the lengthening of time from, say, 7 months to 12 to 18 to 24 months for some of our providers, it's been relatively unfair to our providers that were doing well because we had these bottlenecks where we were going back and forth and not able to have predictable timeframes with many of our vendors. So if we want to commit the JAB resources to someone getting through, we want to say, we can commit that it'll happen in this amount of time. And that way it doesn't impact our other vendors as well, or other vendors that we're working with. And so that's why we want to have that up front, is so that we're all making an informed decision, rather than just sort of saying, hey, that looks good, let's go for it. Why don't we make all of our decisions off of something that actually has data to back it up?
No, that sounds great. So you talked about ACT-IACT. I mentioned the AWS FedRAMP Working Group. What else are some forums that our customers can engage with your program to learn more about AWS, to learn more about the FedRAMP PMO and what's coming in the next couple of months with FedRAMP Accelerated?
So we're going to be having, the biggest thing is we are increasing our just sort of engagement with the community as a whole. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletters at fedramp.gov, please do. We're having a lot more events than we used to have. We sort of, one of my takeaways recently was that we don't talk enough about the work that we do. Even if we're not finished with the work that we're doing or we're almost there, we need to start socializing that and making sure it makes sense and people know what to expect. So we're going to be having some events coming up in the next coming months as well. We're trying to do probably webinars at least once a month as well. So we're trying to create a real community around FedRAMP that eventually will not just be security, but will be how to functionally use cloud and things like that. So ACT-IAC is one of the ones that we are partnering with the most. But the rest would be just pay attention to fedramp.gov and sign up for our newsletters and weekly tips and cues and stuff like that. And that'll be a great place to find out where you can connect with others.
Great. So we have a little more time for some Q&A. So if you have any questions for Matt or myself, please raise your hand and they'll bring a microphone to you. I don't know.
Michaela only gets to ask if it's easy.
Do we have a microphone?
I'd like to stay for another second to reuse for partners in Amazon. We all understand, and I'm coming from government sector, that when you leverage a software as a service that was built on top of Amazon, it's very important how the security controls are inherited.
Mm-hmm.
When they come to FedRAMP with a package, technically, how is that done?
Mm-hmm. So.
Because it's very important what is the set of controls that they are leveraging for the implementation.
Right, so as partners come in, whether it's an agency coming in and directly using Amazon services directly or a partner coming in, it's really the same exact thing. One of the ways, if you look at our security controls, for moderate systems, there's 325. Those 325 controls apply to the system in its entirety. That doesn't mean Amazon does all 325 controls. They have to address if it impacts them or they have some responsibility over it. But so we have a simplified form called the Control Information Summary, which basically defines who's responsible for what controls. And an easy way to think about this, I think there's two types of control sets that I think are easiest to think about it. So if you're a person coming in and leveraging Amazon, you're going to have some sort of responsibilities. If you're looking at physical environmental, like the data center controls, you have nothing to do with those data center controls. Like, it's not like you're the ones worrying about the backup generator or anything like that for the data centers. That is all on Amazon. So that would be fully inherited, and you're fully leveraging that. If you think of something like two-factor authentication, Amazon's going to provide the capabilities for that, but an agency is going to have the back-end system of having their Active Directory and everything like that actually linked up, issue the PIV and CAT cards to your users, and actually enforce that they do that. So there's going to be ways that when you're looking at those 325 controls, where Amazon's going to have responsibility, we're going to have shared responsibilities, and then it's all going to be on you. So it's not like you can just go out and take say that Amazon's got FedRAMP and I have nothing to do and I can just start doing everything I want to. That is where you're going to come into problems. But we try and have it very clearly delineated within FedRAMP who's responsible for what. And even in those controls, it'll say customer responsibility is X, Y, and Z.
Actually, what I wanted to find out is those partners that are coming with a top stack
Mm-hmm.
for FedRAMP, do they have to bundle with a package from Amazon to resubmit that? Or are they just going to point? How do they get access to the information that was really assessed and authorized?
So yeah, I mean, so Amazon has a great partner program where they work with those providers that are coming in. I know that there's a few systems that already reside on top of it. Agencies or customers or other partners that come in will work with Amazon to understand sort of where they delineate their package from the Amazon package. They are bundled in the sense that you have to authorize them together. You can't authorize the top system without the bottom system, but we treat them as though they are, I'm generation of the Legos, so I treat them like Legos, like they sit on top of each other. That is a black box to the partner providers up top. All of the details of what Amazon does, but the types of services that you're using, they describe, and that's when Amazon will work with their partner program to make sure that those providers up top are accurately describing how they're using the Amazon service to deliver services they are offering.
Thank you. Well, it looks like we're past our time. I didn't realize that. I think the clock wasn't working. But Matt will be here for a couple minutes, so if you have any questions, feel free to come up afterwards. But everyone, I'd like to give a round of applause for Matt for coming out here. Thank you very much.